Hey, good evening. Welcome to After the Buzzer. My name is Keith Shirts. I run things here at Hive State Hockey, a place for Utah Hockey Club fans to come hang out, come be with us, come talk a little bit about the Utah Hockey Club. Tough night for the Utah Hockey Club, but we'll get into that more in just a second. If you have been around here before and you're visiting again, welcome back. I congratulate you on your exceedingly fine taste. And also, happy to see you here. If it's your first time, if you visit us for the first time, welcome very much. Hope you enjoy your stay and we get to know each other very well, friend. It was a really, tough game. And I'll go with you, Car Wash. That was not a very well played game by the Utah Hockey Club at all. The first period, they were really, controlled. A pretty dominant performance put in by the New Jersey Devils. I thought that the Devils played, a really strong period of hockey. In that first period, obviously, they only came away with one goal, and that was a good result. But ultimately, the biggest problem that this team had in dealing with the Devils actually came down to just that neutral zone dominance. There were so many times where it seemed like Utah Hockey Club didn't get their feet moving. They didn't find a way to get through the neutral zone and get enough good looks on net. Meanwhile, the second goal scored by Timo Meier right near the beginning of the third period. The second New Jersey Devils goal scored. That was clearly getting beat in the neutral zone. And then to have Curtis Lazar be the guy that scores the final goal, his second of the year. 3-1 the score in favor of the New Jersey Devils, and it is a night for Nico Hischier, former number one overall pick, the captain of the New Jersey Devils, the Swiss international player, collects his 400th point of his career. Congratulations to him. Fantastic player for the New Jersey Devils. He's been a great player for them. Not necessarily the right guy to take at number one, but hasn't been so bad at all. I know that they would be really happy with Cale Makar or maybe Mira Heiskanen, but Nico Hischier, you can't feel too bad if you get him, and certainly they avoided Nolan Patrick in that draft. So Nico Hischier gets his 400th career point. He gets the power play goal in the first. And then you see that Nico Dawes has a great night in net for the New Jersey Devils. The Devils were afraid of what they had in net. They went out and made a trade. We got the backup tonight in Nico Dawes, and Nico Dawes went out and was really good. 24 saves, really excellent job done by Nico Dawes. And so from a Utah Hockey Club perspective, one of the things that I thought they really had a hard time with tonight was they couldn't find their way to, and sorry, I'm looking over at the screen. It looks like a really big save. Joey Decord, I'm monitoring tonight what's happening in Vancouver against Seattle, and it looks like right now Vancouver is losing 3-5, so the Seattle Kraken are doing a favor to the Utah Hockey Club tonight. Earlier today, the Florida Panthers did a favor for the Utah Hockey Club tonight, but the St. Louis Blues, big win. They were dominant in theirs. They actually jump in front of the Utah Hockey Club in the standings as things continue to progress. This is shaping up into a really big game. They're down 2, but really big game for the Canucks because nobody behind them really advanced into striking distance. They had a chance to put some distance between themselves and the competing teams behind them, and they're not doing it. They had a 2-point lead coming into today. They're gonna leave with a 2-point lead over Utah. Calgary was 1 point behind. They're going to leave the day with both Calgary and St. Louis only 1 point behind. So they got 3 teams that are all within a 1-game striking distance of them. They're playing Seattle. This is, again, a team that they ought to beat. But anyway, getting back to what we're looking at, is a good save by Joey Decor. So obviously it distracted me for a second. But the biggest thing that you saw from Utah Hockey Club tonight was that they were unable to really find a way to create opportunities for themselves on the rush. In the second period, they played much better. That was a good 20 minutes of hockey, and then the third period came along, and again, it was like they were super deflated. I don't know why. Overall, this felt like a hockey team that just wasn't very engaged. Wasn't very interested in playing tonight. It just didn't seem like they had the same urgency, the same jump, the same whatever. Now, that can happen when you play a really good team, and the Devils are a really good team. So it's not like it's easy to go out and beat the New Jersey Devils in a game. That's not what I'm suggesting. What I am saying, though, is that it felt to me like Utah did not play with the sort of urgency that was necessary for them to be effective tonight. I didn't feel like they had as much focus. And even down the stretch, when they got on the power play, they went empty net. The play-by-play guy for the Utah Hockey Club, his name's Matt McConnell, he's pleading, somebody shoot. Somebody shoot. And it kind of felt like that was sort of part of the issue for Utah Hockey Club all night, is there was a lot of almost passivity. Sergachev's goal was great. Congrats to Mikhail Sergachev on his 11th goal of the season. It's the most goals he's ever had in a season. If he finds his way to 15 goals, that would be a really, really productive season for Sergachev, combined with the increased amount of minutes he's playing this year. If he can continue to refine his offensive game, I think there's a lot of really interesting things for Mikhail Sergachev to kind of take a look at as it relates to continuing to develop and get his game to the level that it needs to be in order to be, a really, really high-end, top-level player. Like in the Norris Trophy conversation, I guess is what I'm talking about. So let me do a quick check real quick. So yeah, Utah not particularly strong tonight. Not playing. Oh, good. All right, just making sure that we were in good shape over on the stream. So not a particularly good effort put in by Utah Hockey Club tonight. And again, that can be partly credit given to the New Jersey Devils. I thought the Devils looked really strong. That looked like what it looked like was a routine game. It just looked like both teams rolled out the puck, they got it going, they moved their skates a little bit, and then not a whole lot happened outside of that. It was just a pretty relaxed affair overall. It seemed like, New Jersey was able to cruise to where they wanted to get to, and they had a goalie who was making really good saves. The save by Nico Dawes on Logan Cooley, that was an outstanding save with the left-hand glove. His movement from post to post to get that, it was really, really a very nice save by Nico Dawes. And again, Nico Hischier, great for him to get that power play goal. But yeah, for 40 minutes of this game, it was clear that New Jersey was better. And then there was about a 10-minute period in the second period where Utah Hockey Club played better. So if you're kind of getting outplayed 50 out of 60 minutes, you're probably not winning. Probably not winning that game. So a difficult outing for Utah Hockey Club against a team that may just be quite a bad matchup. So they lose 3-1 at home. They lost 3-0 on the road to the New Jersey Devils at the beginning of the year. And so that's where they are. As you take a look at, I think it's worth moving on from that. I don't know that there's a whole lot else to say other than this team is a 2-line hockey team. And that's good. That's better than what some teams can be. They've got a really, really strong line, in my opinion. The one with Gunther and with Cooley, obviously really strong line. And as they've tried different players with them, every player that gets to play with Gunther and Cooley improves and is made better because they're on the line with Gunther and Cooley. The top line, that's Schmaltz and Keller, and then usually it's been Barrett Hayton throughout the year. That is a good line that is more consistent in their performances. Sometimes the Cooley and Gunther line have little dips, but they also have had way higher ceiling moments where there's been moments where you watch Logan Cooley and Dylan Gunther and what they're providing to this team, and it's been a lot more enticing as a fan. It's been a lot more interesting, and you see what they can do at the age that they're at, and it's really exciting to consider how many years of this you get to enjoy as a Utah Hockey Club fan. Meanwhile, if you're busy watching the top line and watching Clayton Keller do his thing with Nick Schmaltz and Barrett Hayton, and Hayton's had a pretty good year. He's had a really good season by his standards. And I think that the point is that they have 2 lines for this team this year. They have 2 lines that produce at a fairly consistent rate, and yet the third and fourth lines have been garbage all season long. And, third line you want to use as a matchup line potentially. It's been better as a matchup line ever since Matias Michelli has been a healthy scratch. The question is how do you get some depth scoring from that third and fourth line? How do you get them to be a positive for your hockey team and help you find a way to, move up in what you're trying to accomplish for those things? The other thing that I thought that we'd just take a quick look at is that's the big question. And the question really too is what's frustrating about that is that Josh Doan is the only guy in the bottom 6 that I'm in love with, and the rest of them I don't care. I don't care. So if Josh Doan wants to be, he needs to be with the Utah Hockey Club long term. That is a player I want on the Utah Hockey Club. That is a player that is a lot of fun to cheer for. So goes. But everybody else, from Bukestad to Kraus to everyone else on that bottom 6, Spicy Tuna, Kerfoot. I like Stenlin. He gives you lots of interesting things. I don't mind having Stenlin. But let me just take a quick look. I'm trying to loading up some of the stats from tonight. And the biggest thing tonight is Utah tonight in terms of expected goals. They did what they needed to do it looks like, to limit New Jersey in what their looks were on expected goals. But again, if you get beat through the neutral zone consistently through the night and you give a couple easier looks at the net, it's going to happen to you. A terrific night for Nico Dawes, 2.537 expected goals against, only 1 goal against, so 1.54 goals above expected, goals saved above expected. That's a great number for him tonight. Meanwhile, if you take a look at where they are with Karel Vejmelka, Vejmelka, he let in 0.65 more goals than was expected. So you never like to see a negative number there. You never like to see that turn that way. Vejmelka has tended to be pretty strong this season. But the free look on the net on that second goal, as soon as the third period started, they just found their way right through the zone, and they gave up such an easy look there. Is disappointing. I like McBain. That's another guy I should mention. I do like McBain, but O'Brien, Stenlin can be a penalty killer, like special teams guy, I guess. But they need to find a way to improve or get more out of Bukestad and Kraus. And even though this was probably the best game of the season for Liam O'Brien, it's like, So, So I think that's kind of the main thing about this team and the takeaways from tonight's game. The Devils were terrific. They played much better than Utah. From the standpoint of ice dominance, it felt like they were more in control of this game. I know that the shots were relatively similar, but ultimately do feel like that's how that goes. Vancouver just goes empty net right now. The score again in Seattle tonight, it's 5-3 in favor of the Kraken, and Vancouver just went empty net. There's 3.5 minutes left in the third period. This is a big result for Utah Hockey Club. There are games in hand for the Canucks. So Utah's played more games than the Canucks, but for the Canucks to not come away with a win on a game like this is a game where they're letting people hang around. And it's one of those things where you're feeling good and fortunate that they're letting you hang around a little bit. But we'll keep our eye on it here. They've got the puck and cycling around the offensive zone right now with the extra Taucher. And it'll be really interesting to see if they can get that through. But there's a clear out of the zone. Puck is bouncing. It's going to go to the far end. And it's touched up. No icing. 2.5 minutes remaining here in the third period in Seattle. They need 2 goals. I mean, it would be crazy. But crazy things have happened before. As it relates to the game of hockey, these things have happened. It's a good forecheck. One of the things at Utah Hockey Club, obviously, they've never scored a goal when they've gone empty net. I think they're the only team in the NHL this year to not find a way to score a goal once they've gone empty net this year. I think the main issue there is when it's 6-on-5, there's just not that much ice out there. And one of the things that Utah does not do is they are not a hard forechecking team. This is not a team that finds their way into forechecking scenarios and creates an opportunity for themselves by, going in, hitting the puck, hitting the player on the puck, getting him off the puck, and then quickly getting the puck on your stick and finding a way back out. There's the empty netter for the Seattle Kraken. So the Kraken are going to go up. Tolvanen, it looks like, scores. So Seattle goes up 6-3. There's 90 seconds left in that one. So Vancouver's not going to be able to take advantage of everybody else losing today. And that's great news for the Utah Hockey Club. Utah Hockey Club is going to stay just 2 games behind the second wild card spot. It's the race to get killed by the Winnipeg Jets. It's the race to watch Connor Hellebuck frustrate you for 4 straight games or 3 games. And then, anyway. So Vancouver's going to go down tonight. They are going to lose, which is a wild thing to see happen. that Seattle team, it's not a great team. Not a great team at all. But they'll have 60 games down. They'll be at 65 points. Utah Hockey Club's played 61 games, 21 games remaining for them, and they are 2 points behind. So they're firmly in the mix. Firmly in the mix as we get ready to attack the trade deadline. And it begins the colossal question, right, of what on earth do you do if you're general manager Bill Armstrong for the Utah Hockey Club? They have plenty of days to kind of take a look at it and see what they can solve as it relates to it. Their next game is on Thursday, the 6th of March. They're playing at the Detroit Red Wings. And then on the second game of the back-to-back, they're at the Chicago Blackhawks. So they have a few days off here to recover from their 5-game homestand. This is a long time for them to be at home coming off of the Four Nations. They had the one game in Los Angeles, but more often than not, they've been home for the last month. Now they got to go on the road, play a Detroit team who's playing good hockey right now, and then go play the Blackhawks, who are garbage. That's a terrible team. So, only 2 more games left in the mix before the trade deadline, and so it brings into view the tremendously big question. What on earth do you do if you're Utah Hockey Club as it relates to the trade deadline? We are 5 days out now because the day's over. All the games are going to be done. Did the Ducks lose as well? I know the Ducks were sort of in the mix. If the Ducks lost too, that's a devastating loss by Vancouver. It really is. You gotta grab those games when you get a chance. Let's take a look real fast. Yeah, the Ducks are gonna lose to Chicago. It's 6-3 there too. Oh boy, Anaheim. So everybody shot themselves in the foot today except for St. Louis. St. Louis is the only one to capitalize on things. And so, oh man, Utah's going to be right in the mix with those 4 teams. It seems like all 4 of those teams are going to be right on each other's throats all the way to the finish line here. Vancouver, Calgary, St. Louis, Utah. I believe Anaheim bows out of the chase tonight officially. Unless they go on a wild winning streak, but they are not going to do that. So yeah, Vancouver, they go down tonight. Calgary loses today with Florida. You got St. Louis with the big win today. Utah Hockey Club loses to the New Jersey Devils, and Anaheim also loses. So those 5 teams that are in the mix, nobody's able to make a move or capitalize on it except for St. Louis, and they're able to jump above Utah Hockey Club, who now drop to the 5th place spot in the wild card standings. But again, only 2 points separating them from getting to Vancouver. And so, what do you do if you're Bill Armstrong? How do you solidify that 3rd and 4th line and find a way to get it producing goals for your team? How do you get the 3rd and 4th lines to not be a net negative for this team, whenever they're on the ice? They aren't scoring when they're on the ice. The only thing that happens when they're on the ice is that the other team might score. So they're not playing particularly strong hockey right now. Are there moves that they can make to develop that 3rd and 4th line? Moves that are goal-scoring additions to help you with your 3rd and 4th line as you get it in. The other part of it is from a developmental standpoint, we're not developing any players on the 3rd and 4th line outside of Doan and McBain. The rest of them, they're kind of who they are. There isn't more to learn or unlock about Nick Bjugstad. There isn't more to learn and unlock about Lawson Krause. They're kind of what they are at this point. Matthias Michelli, there's room to continue to develop. But again, he continues to not play because it seems like they're trying to make sure he stays healthy so they can deal him. In 1 week's time, it's very, very likely he is no longer a member of the Utah Hockey Club. So the big question mark, we've mentioned it in the last few streams that we've had. The big question mark is what do you do about Mikko Rantanen? Mikko Rantanen has still not signed his contract with the Carolina Hurricanes. There is this crazy, Eric Tulsky is an outsider. He's not a typical hockey guy. Carolina is a nice market, a good fan base. It's been a good hockey team there. But for whatever reason, they are not willing to spend money. They just don't like to do that. And so they've tended to be relatively cheap. That's sort of the history of the Carolina Hurricanes organization. So they made this big splashy trade for Mikko Rantanen, and now they're busy trying to sign him to a long-term deal, and they've been unable to close the deal on that. He may just go the rest of the way of this season to become an unrestricted free agent. And the question is, and the thing everybody has been a little surprised at, is that apparently Eric Tulsky is investigating trading Mikko Rantanen out of Carolina after he acquired him a month ago. And the reason that you trade for Mikko Rantanen is it obviously helps you this year. You don't get a guy who is definitely going to get 35 goals a season. You don't get a player like that. It's hard to get those guys, right? He's a better goal scorer, in my opinion, than Clayton Keller. So you go and get a talented left winger. He loves playing off wing on the right wing. So you can play him on either end, either side of the ice. So he gives you some opportunity on the left wing or the right wing, and he just finishes lethally. He's got such a great shot. And so the question is do you trade and give up some assets to Carolina to get Mikko Rantanen to your team and then get the advantage of being the only team in this offseason or when you're trying to do an unrestricted free agent deal to be the only team that can offer him 8 years on his contract? That is the advantage. So from a negotiation standpoint, if you have his rights, you have the ability to sign him to an 8-year contract. If you do not have him on your team, then you are only able to get him up to 7 years. And so the question is if you're going to give him $14 million a year, you can do that on one team and only do it for 7 years, but this other team could do it for 8 years. And the question is does Mikko Rantanen care about a 7 versus an 8-year deal? Right now, it's been pretty clear that he doesn't necessarily care about that with Carolina. And also, I want to have a frank conversation about there isn't really reason to believe that he'd want to come to Utah. Other than those of us who are here who love it, we don't get why there's people who don't want to come, but there's people who don't want to come to the state of Utah and live in Salt Lake City. So the question is it worth trading it for him? And of course, you would have to know that as part of that trade, you would be able to acquire him for that 8-year deal. Has to be the case. But here's the thing. With all that preamble in place, Utah has so much cap space available. If you could get a guy like Mikko Rantanen and have the opportunity to get him to agree to an 8-year deal. So if, what is it going to cost you? Well, here's what it cost Carolina. They had to give up Martin Necas and Drury. Okay? 2 pieces. So, if that's what the market is, what does it mean for Utah? What is Utah going to have to give up in order to get in on having that player come? And I think it looks like something like this. I think it's something like a Nick Schmaltz and Matthias Michelli. And maybe a future asset from the draft. Let's say the guy they took in the second round, whose name escapes me right now. I don't know that you want to give up Cole Baudouin, but, I don't think Nick Schmaltz is as good as Martin Necas. But I also think that Michelli's better than Drury. So, Jack Drury. So, I think you combine those two, you're pretty close. I think you need something a little bit more. And then in order to make the salaries work, Utah would need to retain the salary and pay for somebody. They'd have to pay for somebody to stay with to stay on the team. So they would be paying some of Nick Schmaltz's contract for the next 2 years in order to make the salary match, while also then signing Rantanen after that. And their salary cap is basically blown at that point because they would need to save the space that's going to grow as the cap grows. Save that space because they're going to need to sign Logan Cooley, and that's going to be expensive. However, I am happy to trade Matthias Michelli and Nick Schmaltz and a 3rd-round pick, or work with a third organization that sends something to Carolina, and then we retain, 80% of Nick Schmaltz's salary. If you do all of those things and you could find a way to make that work, and it means that you got a Dylan Guenther, Logan Cooley, Mikko Rantanen line for the next 8 years, do it! That's a no-doubter. Of course. Of course. Of course. Where does it leave you with Clayton Keller? I mean, that's the other way. You could do a Barrett Hayton, or you could do Cooley, and I mean, having too many good goal scorers, it sounds okay to me. And finding pieces to support Clayton Keller so that he has more around him, that sounds like a good thing to me. And while I'm busy spending Ryan Smith's money, maybe he'll be okay with being over the cap and the penalties that come with all that. And maybe they take a run at a couple of these other guys. But that is what the deal would have to look like. But again, you would need to be working with Rantanen's agent to confirm that Rantanen is willing to agree to a deal with Utah before you trade Michelli and Schmaltz and future asset X or last year's 3rd rounder or 2nd rounder. But people would say, oh, maybe that's a lot. It is But again, you got to remember, you got a 35 goal scorer, and he's going to be playing with Dylan Guenther, and he's going to be playing with Logan Cooley, and that is going to be one of the best lines in hockey for the next decade. That's okay. I don't think Nick Schmaltz, Matthias Michelli, and a second rounder or a third rounder would ever make us feel bad about having that. So, to me, it's a slam dunk no brainer. I think he's a great player. People will say, "Well, we don't know look at what he is now. He hasn't played with McKinnon. And now that he hasn't played with McKinnon, he's not doing much in Carolina because he's not playing with McKinnon." Okay, I agree. Not that Logan Cooley's as good as Nathan McKinnon, but Logan Cooley's pretty freaking good. He's on year 2. He's kind of coming into his own. He's getting tougher and stronger. Kind of like it. I kind of like it. Yes. So that's the big fish. And I do think that Utah, just based on all the rumors, it does seem like Utah's looking at it. So if they're looking at it, that to me is what those conversations look like. Is it and since Carolina's thinking about lifting the cup this year, and they're moving Rantanen out because they don't think they'll re-sign him, and they might as well get something for it, and maybe that's not really thinking about this year, but it's also, I think, salaries have to match. That's the hardest part of this, but because Carolina is going to be crazy, and you might have to retain a fair amount of salary, but Schmaltz is off the books next year, so it's not too terrible to retain most of Nick Schmaltz's salary because it's off the books. You're not going to hold on to it for year after year. If it was Lawson Krause, it'd be more painful, but I'm certain that Carolina would rather have Nick Schmaltz. So, yeah. That's, if you're curious what I think it takes, it's like Schmaltz, Michelli, and something else. Maybe a future block for Carolina. But again, does anyone feel bad about what we gave up to get Sergachev? I don't. Geeky's been okay for Tampa. JJ Mosier's is fine. Second pair defenseman, third pair defense. It's fine. I'd rather have Sergachev. And I know it's hard to find depth, and getting, quality depth really helps you. You've really got to find ways to score on all 4 lines, but they have a pretty strong blue line at this point. Feel decent about it. I think it's interesting. I got thinking about this thought exercise. One of the things that I don't know that I agree with it, but it's an interesting thing. When they released Juuso Välimäki, somehow they must have thought that nobody was going to claim him. But the fact that they were willing to risk him like that, but not risk Nick DeSimone, kind of an interesting. They might think that Nick DeSimone is better than Juuso Välimäki, and I haven't really looked at that. So that's something that I should look at and try to figure that out. But interesting. So anyway, that is the broad view of this trade deadline. Is first they need to find out. I don't think they're in the Brock Nelson thing. I just don't. I think Brock Nelson's going to go to a better team who's closer. But I do think that Rantanen and I know Brock Nelson needs to be signed, but it's not going to be this $14 million deal. It's going to be a nice, healthy deal, but it's not going to be what Rantanen gets. And so the question is if Utah really believes they're in that mix, the other thing that you could do is just wait and see, and then hope that Carolina gets bounced early in the playoffs again, and then hope that in the offseason, as a full unrestricted free agent with less money on the table and less years on the table for Mikko Rantanen, he looks at Salt Lake City and decides he wants that instead of the palm trees of Florida and Las Vegas and Southern California with the Kings. And like, I just have a hard time believing that one, that he is actually going to come here, because it's never happened in the NBA. Really? Where the top player, it's never happened where the top player in free agency said, yes, I want Utah. That's where I want to go. It's never happened. Okay. That's it for tonight. Those are all the things that are on my mind as we take a look at what Utah Hockey Club is dealing with this season, as as they had a really rough night on the ice. The results everywhere else, kind of no harm, no foul. It was nobody really moved in a significant way that impacts nobody. Vancouver doesn't extend their lead. Calgary didn't extend their lead. And the Blues have just inserted themselves as more of a contender for that final wild card spot. And again, it's this mad dash to figure out who gets to get destroyed by Winnipeg. But being in the mix, and I'll finish with this thought. If the point at the beginning of the season for Bill Armstrong was to take a look at the Utah Hockey Club at the beginning of the year and say, what I want for this group, in particular, I'm thinking about the young guys. So you're busy thinking about guys who haven't done it before. So, Gunther and Cooley and McBain and Hayton and, frankly, Keller, because he hasn't really done much. What they will be looking at is, how do these guys perform, or what experience can we give them in games that have a lot on the line? And can they perform in those scenarios where they need to go out and win the game? In my opinion, tonight was one of those games. Tonight was one of those games. And they certainly failed the test. The good news is, all the other teams also failed their tests except for St. Louis. And Utah's still a one-game swing away from being right in the mix. All the other teams have some games in hand, but we'll know a lot more come Thursday night when they play the Detroit Red Wings, as the schedules will balance out a little bit, and we'll know what the deficit is, because it'll be more balanced at that point. And then we'll see. We'll see where Utah stands. And in a weird, crazy way, that game at Detroit, if Utah loses and there's a bunch of other results and Utah finds themselves 6 points out going into trade deadline Friday, they'll probably just stand pat. If the results work a different way, where Utah wins at Detroit and other teams lose and they're in the mix, I think Utah's an active player at the trade deadline. And it's crazy. It is crazy that they can't just pick what path they want to be at. And maybe the real answer is there's no path. They're not going to sell their unrestricted free agents. They're not going to look to try to move Alexander Kerfoot. They're not going to look to try to get, Bukestad somewhere and try to get some sort of asset for him, a third or fourth round pick. They're just going to stay where they are. They're going to play it out and get the experience of, trying to get into the playoffs. And if they miss, they miss. And maybe it's just the stand pat move. And maybe that's what the whole goal is. But it doesn't seem like it based on some of the reporting that's been out there. So, fascinating week in front of us. I hope you had a terrific Saturday. Utah Hockey Club loses to the New Jersey Devils by score 3-1. It's a good night to be a Nico and play for the Devils. Nico Hischier, Nico Dawes, best players in the game tonight for the Devils. And that is it. We will see you next time. Have a good evening. Utah Hockey Club loses. They'll get them next time.